Hey everybody, welcome back to Twin Oaks Farm Poultry on YouTube. It's day 38 of raising our flock of broilers. We're going to take a look at the flock. This is the morning of day 38. Got a few updates. We've had a little bit of population decline. I believe we were at 297 on day 37. Now we're at 296. We actually had a bird die on day 37. The bird was healthy and thriving. I'll end up telling you the story, but honest to goodness, I think it died of being scared to death. So I'll fill you in on that. 4 years, over 2,000 Cornish rock cross meat chickens, and it's really the first instance I've ever seen of what happened. So we'll fill you in on that. Also, we talked about on broilers day 36 how they react if the feeders have gone empty and they're ready to eat, or if they've had to wait a while eating. And that's actually what is going on behind me in the pen. You can hear it's noisy, it's tumultuous. They're really jostling at the feeders to get to the feeders because now we've got lights up, doors open, barn awake, and have put feed in the feeders. And so we're basically, and we talked about that, I believe, in broilers day 36 and have on other occasions. Two things we don't like to do in our management practices with our meat chickens. We don't like to do a 12 on, 12 off feed schedule, and we don't like to let feeders go empty. We refuse to remove feeders from the pen, but we don't even like to let them go empty. And basically, because they turn into piranhas is why. And it just, we've got a beagle dog that lives here, and he never developed the comeback reflex very well. So, all beagle dogs typically do live in humane dog boxes because they're hunting dogs. They pick up a scent, they're going to go. But with our little beagle, we say his brain is in his nose, because he gets out, and he's a good rabbit dog. He's a good hunter, but he gets out on it. He can pinpoint him, but he ain't coming back. So, so we have to be really mindful of not letting him loose, And with these meat birds, how does that relate to these meat birds? With these meat birds, when they get to finished, like when they get to the condition of being finished, being ready to process, I'm telling you, their brains are in their stomachs, because they are just like crazed for food. We're trying to maintain them on 100 pounds a day for the 296 birds, because that's our target feed range. And we have a target feed range in order to avoid overfeeding them, because I've said before as well, if we're willing to overfeed meat chickens, they're willing to overeat. Letting them overeat leads to bad problems. And if you let a whole flock overeat, that's a condition across the flock. We're going to have heavy loss. We're either going to have a lot of heart problem or a lot of leg problem, a lot of both. So we don't want to overfeed them. But then on the other hand, we also want to maximize growth in about 6 weeks. We're learning we can do it in 5. So we'll probably adjust to that for 2024 in our operations. But in order to finish them on a short production cycle like the 6 weeks, we use overhead light 24/7 throughout production from start, grow to finish. So we had to basically look at the situation and say, what are we going to do about these birds to keep them on the target feed consumption range, because they're active all 24 hours. They do have a resting cycle and an eating drinking cycle, but it's continuing throughout 24 hours. And one thing about chickens is they do see exceedingly well in light, in well-lit conditions. In dark conditions, they don't see well, so they become inactive. So basically, like I said, we have birds, we're trying to feed them 100 pounds of feed a day until finish, which is now only 7 days. And I have 8 bags of feed left. Actually, I have 7 bags of feed left. So obviously, 7 bags of feed isn't going to finish us. The last day of production, we do a feed withdrawal. So, like the last 18 hours, there's no feed in the pen at all. We do pull feeders then, because you're trying to do a clean out process before you send them, or before you process them even yourselves. You need to do that. You need to do a feed withdrawal. And then 2 days at the end, we plan on taking them off the complete prepared commercial feed anyway and putting them on a single ingredient feed. We just finish them on cracked corn the very last 2 days. That's a topic we can address in another video. We always get asked, why do you do that? I can do that in another video. But so that frees us up, 3 days. I'm gonna have to go to the mill or go to the farm, the other farm, and get probably 200 pounds of corn. And we've been saying these birds are about 200 pounds ahead of where we want them to be. So if I take out, those 3 days, and I've got 7 bags of feed to go about 4 days, really, they want more than that. So what do we do about that as a producer? But let's take a look at the birds, and I'll keep answering that. What do we do about that as a producer? And see, they're still, I mean, this feed has been available in the pen for about 15 minutes, and it's just like, the ones that are still there at the feeder, man, they're crazy over it. They can't get enough. Brain is in the stomach. So what do we do as a producer? If we're confident we're feeding enough to sustain the bird's growth and feeding high quality enough feed, the right balance of minerals, the right balance of vitamins, enough protein, but those birds are acting like they can't get enough food. Well, like I told you in our case, we basically have lighting on 24/7. So the first thing a producer might think is, I can pull the feeders out. I can give them the allotment and pull the feeders out. This is exactly why we don't. And this is mild, but y'all can see every feeder is chock full of birds, and there's birds trying to push in. Every feeder. And you can't see it, but I did an extra feeder there where that clump of birds is. They've got it, it's a small feeder, they've got it covered up. Every feeder is full, and they're pretty well eaten up 50 pounds in about 20 minutes here. So every feeder's full. So this is why we don't want to pull feeders, because then the time they have to spend going without feed, they just become food crazed. And then when we put feeders back in, it's just like, survival of the fittest, and they're just hungry. I don't know, is it Hunger Games? I don't know what you call it. But anyway, so as a producer, we could think we'll leave our lights on and we'll pull the feeders. We don't like that option because of what it creates. I also said we don't like feeders to go empty. It creates the same frenzy. If we let feeders go empty, leaving them sitting in there, and the birds are active around the clock, it creates the very same frenzy when we put feed in. That's what's happened here. And as I said, this is calm. The pen has calmed down considerably. They went nuts. This was the first feeder I put feed in, and I couldn't even get out of the mob fast enough after I put feed in it. So if we determine that pulling the feeders out is not a good option, and if we determine that leaving the feeders in and letting them go empty is not a great option, what other options do we have? And this is where it's really worthwhile to know, as a poultry producer, that you can impact and influence the bird's activity level as well as circadian rhythm with lighting. So you don't want sudden light changes with your birds. We have found, for example, like if our flocks are accustomed to lighting 24/7, and like we have the barn all closed up and it's nighttime and we shut the overhead light off and it goes dark, it really is abrupt and disruptive for the birds, and they get rattled, they get flustered. But if we turn, check this out. This one, it had its foot on another one's back. It was trying to actually step over the other bird to get into the feeder tray. So we have learned, though, if we're going to alter lighting, and if you run birds in a chicken tractor, this is already happening naturally for you. But we have learned that with our birds in a barn, look how they want to shove in. We've learned that with our birds in a barn, in order to make like those light changes, we need to work with daybreak and nightfall. So what we'll do, and I think I explained this in day 37 broilers video, what we'll do is, like, before dusk, we'll turn the overhead light off, we'll close all the barn doors up, and then, there's still enough natural light kind of filters in to the gaps between the boards in this building that they'll get the gradual sense of dusk coming on and nightfall. descending without it being an abrupt thing. And they'll just, and when it happens that way, they just sit down and they're calm and they're quiet and it's no problem. So, so what we're going to need to start doing is filling the feeders, like, after we've turned the overhead light off and started shutting doors, probably fill the feeders then to hopefully not have them eating on it all night overnight. Because as I said, when it's dark, they're not active. So that feed will be there for them when they get up. We're still going to have a little bit of that frenzy because when it becomes light and they want to eat, they're going to go right to those feeders. But it's not going to be as pushy, as shovey, as dramatic. So that's what we do with that. But that's what I'm saying about lighting impact. What we know about letting ourselves work with nightfall and letting dusk bring on nightfall and let them experience natural dark overnight is that that basically makes them inactive for like whatever overnight period, about 12 hours. And so that in effect does incorporate a 12-hour on, 12-hour off feed schedule, but it does it being mindful of the nature of the chicken and being mindful of not keeping the chicken active all 24 hours and without food half of it, because that just causes them to become really greedy. But they're not like this as much about food when they're younger. We see this in flocks when those birds have reached finish point, like that's when they really get bad about being shovey about food. Okay, so that's one thing. So another thing I wanted to mention, back in hopefully I'll get it all said, back in, I think it was Broilers Day 29, we did feature a bird that we said it was having heart trouble. We predicted it would pass away of natural consequences of that within a few days. It actually took it about 7, so it ended up being Broilers Day 36 when it passed away. And that typically gets called sudden death syndrome, even though we showed that that's not sudden. 7 days from getting on our radar with an onset of symptoms to actually dying, that's not sudden. It was the outcome of a chronic condition that progressively got worse, right? So on the other hand, we did actually have a sudden death. I don't know that I'd say sudden death syndrome, but we had a sudden death on Broilers Day 37 yesterday. It wasn't in the video because the bird had not died yet, but let me tell you what happened later in the day. Chickens are very alert to overhead, anything overhead, really, any loud noise or disturbance overhead. And so we apparently had, we're going to look out the doorway here, we apparently had a hawk kind of patrolling this wood line here. I don't know if the camera will handle the lighting, but we could hear it out here. I was in the building, we could hear it out here, and there's a cornfield right beside us. And we do have hawks that will swoop down in low, just right above the top of the corn, and come down low and hunt there. I don't know if a hawk was hunting this wood line, but we could hear it, the birds and I, and we could hear it like, that direction that we're looking at. And I saw the birds collectively as a flock all kind of stop what they're doing, set, and look that direction. And then it sounded like it got closer and closer, and it was screeching really loud. I really think it maybe ended up around this tree, because we've seen them in some of these trees right here. I don't know what it was hunting or looking for, but it screeched so loud that literally all of these birds, even though they're in a building and the hawk is not getting in here, and they've never been threatened by a hawk before, and they're not outside, they were so in tune to that predator, that raptor predator overhead. All the birds were like evenly spaced out in the pen like this, and all of them, when that hawk was like closest and sounded so loud and terrible, there wasn't a lead dog. They collectively did it. All the birds went from this south side of the building and just immediately and quickly shifted over to that north side of the building and sat there as a collective group just waiting it out. And at that same time, one of these birds that had been right actually here in this area shrieked real loud, flapped its wings, flipped a couple somersaults in the air. It was probably dead before the episode of it flipping up in the air, but it died. And all I can think of is it got scared to death from the presence of a hawk beside the building. So like I said, we've raised other chickens too, and other livestock too, but we've raised these Cornish rock cross meat chickens specifically for about 4 years. So 4 years, just over 2,000 birds. That's the first time I've ever seen a bird that I really will go on record saying I believe it died of being scared to death. So first time for everything, but we're going to wrap it up. So we are at 296. We still got to go about 7 days. Processing isn't until day 45. We're going to keep you posted a video a day on these birdies. This one was long, but thanks for bearing with me. Please join us again. Please subscribe. And thanks to all our viewers. Thanks to all our subscribers. We hit 400 this week, into this week here. 400 subscribers. So I appreciate our community of subscribers so much. Thanks for joining us. God bless all of y'all. We'll let this roll about 10 more seconds and we'll see you back in the barn on day 39.